alliance as a result of NATO's airstrikes in order to protect safe areas. The Serbian artillery deployed on the surrounding hills of Sarajevo continued to harass the city. So NATO's airstrikes had only a partial and temporary effect, but they were far from deterring the aggressor. What was the reason for these ineffective airstrikes? The reason was primarily the NATO airstrikes remained within the limits of peacekeeping principles. General Michael Rose, the UNPROFOR commander in Bosnia, explains this in the following terms. NATO was constrained by the minimum use of force necessary to achieve a specific aim. But by specific aim is not very clear here. The term is not very clear. Specific aim was a very limited specific target, such as a single tank or a single artillery position. So NATO was given the task of hitting a single tank or a single artillery position. And NATO was not allowed to go further. General Rose continues, NATO was also limited by warning, the requirement of warning before the use of force. All use of force had to be proportional. And finally, the risk of collateral damage to be kept to a minimum. Moreover, on the operational level, the use of air power depended on a dual key system, that's to say, an agreement both by SECSALT and the United Nations Commander. On the political level, the United Nations Secretariat had the final word. The Secretary General points out one of his reports that NATO could act only in agreement with UNPROFOR and in full consultation with it. It remains the responsibility of his Secretary General's Special Representative to weigh the political and even operational consequences of such actions before or agreeing to their initiation. The overall cooperation between the United Nations and NATO is then characterized in ex-Yugoslavia by a dubious legitimacy, ambiguous objectives on the political and operational level, and a duality of command and control. The Yugoslav experience has evinced that this is not the proper way how NATO should contribute to the maintenance of international peace and security. NATO is primarily a military alliance designed to deter and defeat military aggression. And this primary function of NATO continues to be relevant in the post-Cold War era. NATO, for instance, could successfully undertake a United Nations authorized operation on the condition that it was based on a clear political objective that should be achieved by the use of coercive military force under the strategic and operational command and control of NATO itself. It's to be noted that NATO can act under Article 51 of the Charter even without a Security Council authorization. And this aspect of the problem has always been overlooked by the major powers in the post-Cold War era, because they always looked for a Security Council authorization, which may not be always necessary. NATO could act without such an authorization under Article 51, and after having undertaken the operation, NATO has to inform the Security Council, and the operation can go on until the moment when the Security Council will be in a position to fulfill its primary responsibility. This is particularly important because with an increasingly assertive Russia having interests opposed to those of the West, the Security Council may in the future have difficulty to decide and act. States whose territorial integrity and political independence are threatened may invite NATO or individual NATO members to come to their aid in order to defend the aggressed country. And Article 51 of the UN Charter allows such an operation. And individual members of NATO, even without a decision of NATO Council, may go to the assistance of such a state victim of aggression by using NATO infrastructure and NATO command, control, and communication systems. This is actually what happened during the Operation Desert Storm. Just to conclude, the role assumed by NATO in ex-Yugoslavia was apparently not an appropriate one for NATO. So what may be an appropriate role for NATO? I believe that one of the major challenges facing the alliance in the post-Cold War era is how to contribute to the functioning of regional balances of power. In the post-Cold War era, there was a global balance of power and one regional balance of power which was of vital significance to Western security, and it was the Persian Gulf area. In the post-Cold War era, there is no global balance of power, but there are more than one regional systems of balance of power. Persian Gulf is only one of them. We have, for instance, Eastern Europe, another regional system. We have the Black Sea basin, where Ukraine occupies a very important geostrategic position. There is the Caucasus, and of course the Balkans. I think European security will increasingly be dependent in the future on the stability in all these regions. For this reason, contribution of NATO to the smooth functioning of the regional balance systems is of utmost importance in the post-war world. This would, of course, consist of preventing the re-emergence of hegemonic powers in all these regions. I think if NATO wants to revitalize itself, then the most appropriate role for NATO would be to begin to rethink the growing strategic significance of regional balance. I would like to make another point concerning ex-Yugoslavia. Christopher Svic and Ivo Banac referred to the importance of military solution for the realization of a political program in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I think in the realization of such a political program through military means, NATO could play, or individual members of NATO, using NATO infrastructure, could play a very important role, a vital role. Even if, upon the realization of such a political program, the new state created in Bosnia and Herzegovina, even I believe Croatia, would need a guarantee system. And such a guarantee system may be undertaken by NATO. Even after the realization of such a program, NATO may play a very important strategic role in the state.
Thank you very much. We have about 12 or 13 minutes for brief comments and questions. I'm not going to spend 10 of those with my own comments, but I will just use my privilege to ask the first question. You gave a very fine analysis, Professor Karas-Manoglu, of the hybrid quality of the UN mandate.